Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
The best part about this story was watching how it unfolded. It was back in the 80s, when people thought their shiny new cars were extensions of their egos. My friend Dave had one of those big vans with a side door and a heavy metal lift for his wheelchair. The thing was a beast, solid metal, and built like a tank. It had to be because Dave wasn't about to let some shoddy mechanism fail on him when he needed it most. We pulled into the parking lot of the bank, and Dave parked in one of those double-sized handicap spots. You know, the ones that have extra space with all those diagonal lines. That space wasn't decorative. It was there so people like Dave could actually get out of their vehicles without performing some kind of circus act. He parked, turned off the engine, and hit the switch to start lowering the ramp. Out of nowhere, this pristine Cadillac comes barreling into the lot and screeches to a halt right in the extra space next to Dave's van. The door flung open and out stepped the Karen of Karens. She had the teased-up hair, oversized sunglasses, and that smug look of entitlement that practically screamed, "The world revolves around me." Dave, cool as ever, rolled down his window and called out, "Hey, I need that space to lower my ramp." She barely even glanced at him before snapping, "I'll just be a minute." Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she marched off toward the bank. I couldn't believe it. Dave let out a frustrated sigh, muttering something under his breath, and hit the button to try lowering the ramp anyway. The lift creaked and groaned as it started descending, but then the edge of it hit the roof of her Cadillac. Dave looked at me, raised an eyebrow, and said, "Guess we're doing this the hard way." Now let me tell you, this lift wasn't some flimsy contraption. It was solid steel and weighed a ton. As Dave tried to lower it again, the corner dug into her car's roof, scraping the paint and leaving a noticeable dent. The sound it made, metal grinding against metal, was loud enough to turn a few heads in the parking lot. I could feel my own heart racing, half expecting her to come storming out any second. But she didn't. Dave, calm as ever, said, "Well, I warned her," and tried again. This time, the lift's edge hit one of her windows, cracking it with a sharp. By now people were starting to gather, whispering and pointing. A man walking by stopped and said, "You sure she's not going to flip when she sees that?" Dave just shrugged. She shouldn't have parked there. It was at this moment Karen came storming out of the bank, holding some papers in one hand and her purse in the other. She looked like she was on the warpath. "What the hell are you doing to my car?" she shrieked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Dave didn't even flinch. "Trying to use the handicap spot like it's supposed to be used," he said. "You know, for people who actually need it." Karen's face turned an unnatural shade of red. "You're damaging my car," she screamed. "Stop it right now." Dave just leaned back in his seat and crossed his arms. "Lady, I told you I needed the space. You're the one who decided your errand was more important than my mobility." At this point, Karen was practically frothing at the mouth. She pulled out her brick of a mobile phone, one of those old ones that looked like it could double as a weapon, and started dialing. "I'm calling the police," she yelled. "You're gonna pay for this, you handicapped guy trying to park in a handicap spot." Dave finished for her. The crowd was eating this up. Someone even let out a chuckle, which only seemed to fuel Karen's rage. She turned to the growing group of onlookers and started pleading her case. "He's damaging my car for no reason. Look at what he's done." A woman in the crowd crossed her arms and said, "For no reason, you're parked in a handicap spot. What did you think was going to happen?" Karen's face turned even redder as she whipped around to glare at the woman. "What do you mean? I was only gone for a minute." The woman shook her head, her voice sharp. "You're in a spot reserved for people who actually need it. It doesn't matter how long you were gone. You're not supposed to be there." Karen stomped her foot. "I said I was only gone for a minute. Do you people not understand how little time that is?" Another man from the crowd chimed in, his tone sarcastic. "Oh sure, because a minute is all it takes for you to block someone who actually needs that space. Great logic." Karen turned to him, her voice rising. "Stay out of this. I don't need a lecture from a bunch of strangers." The woman who first spoke shrugged, crossing her arms tighter. "Then maybe don't park where you're not supposed to. Pretty simple." Karen's hands shook as she jabbed a finger toward the crowd. "You're all acting like I committed some huge crime. I wasn't even gone long enough for this to be a problem." The murmurs from the crowd grew louder as Karen's excuses kept piling up. Someone muttered, "Unbelievable." Another bystander, "Yeah, a minute too long. Maybe don't park there next time." It wasn't long before a police car pulled into the lot. Two officers stepped out, and Karen wasted no time running over to them. Officer, this man has been destroying my car," she cried, pointing at Dave like he was some kind of criminal mastermind. The officers walked over, taking in the scene, the scratched roof, the cracked window, and Dave sitting there as calm as could be. One of them asked, "Sir, what happened here?" Dave explained the situation. gesturing to the handicap placard hanging from his rearview mirror and the now dented Cadillac blocking his ramp. "I told her I needed the space to lower my lift," he said. "She said she'd only be a minute and ran inside. I tried to lower it anyway, but her car was in the way." Karen cut in, her voice shrill. "He didn't try to lower it, he did it on purpose. Look at my car." The officer held up a hand to silence her. "Ma'am, is this your vehicle?" he asked, pointing to the Cadillac. "Of course it is," she snapped. "And look what he did to it. And were you parked in the handicap spot?" the officer continued. Karen hesitated for a split second before saying, "Well, yes, but..." The officer didn't let her finish. "Do you have a handicap placard or plate?" "No, but I was only gone for a minute," she protested. The officer shook his head and started writing her a ticket. Karen's jaw dropped. "Are you serious? You're giving me a ticket?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Parking in a handicap spot without proper authorization is a violation." Karen turned to the crowd, desperate for support, but all she got were smirks and a few raised eyebrows. She looked back at the officer and tried a different approach. "But look at what he did to my car. He should be paying for this." The second officer spoke up. "Actually, ma'am, it looks like your insurance will be covering the damages. If you hadn't been parked illegally, this wouldn't have happened." Karen let out a noise that was somewhere between a scream and a groan. "This is ridiculous. I'm the victim here." Dave couldn't resist. "Victim of your own choices," he said, smirking. The officers handed her the ticket and walked back to their car, leaving Karen to stand there fuming while the crowd started to disperse. She glared at Dave one last time before stomping back to her Cadillac, muttering under her breath about lawyers and lawsuits. Dave just looked at me and said, "You ready to go?" I nodded, still trying to process everything that had just happened. As we pulled out of the lot, I glanced back and saw Karen sitting in her car, arms crossed, with the ticket still in her hand. She wasn't going anywhere. Not until she figured out how to explain the damage to her insurance company.
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
It all started in the parking lot of a big box store, the kind of place where everyone seems perpetually rushed and the carts have a mind of their own. I had just pulled into a handicapped spot near the entrance, one of the few perks of my otherwise challenging mobility issues. The moment I put my car in park, I could feel someone's eyes boring into me. I hadn't even had a chance to hang my tag from the mirror yet when a car screeched into the hatch-marked area next to me, tires squealing in an overly dramatic display. Out stepped Karen, yes, a full-on Karen, complete with the haircut, the aggressive posture, and the face that screamed self-importance. She zeroed in on me like a heat-seeking missile. "Oh, just wonderful," she barked, throwing her arms up. "Another inconsiderate jerk taking up a handicapped spot without a tag. People like you make life hell for the rest of us." I blinked at her as she continued her tirade, her voice rising and echoing across the parking lot. The rant went on. Something about how selfish I was, how I should be ashamed of myself. She accused me of faking a disability, throwing in a jab about young people these days. All the while, I was calmly taking my hearing aids out. They'd been bothering me, and frankly, I didn't need them to catch the gist of her screeching. Once I was done, I stepped out of my car, tag in hand, and deliberately hung it from the mirror. Then I turned to face her, making sure to catch her eye. "Is this what you're looking for?" I asked, my voice even but loud enough to carry over her ongoing complaints. Her face twisted into an expression I'll never forget. First, there was the stunned silence, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then came the stammering. "Well, you could have put it up sooner. How was I supposed to know? I guess you could have asked," I replied with a shrug. "But where's the fun in that, huh?" That set her off again. She launched into another rant, now blaming me for letting her humiliate herself. Apparently, I was the problem for not stopping her sooner, and somehow I'd ruined her day. She stormed off toward the store entrance, muttering insults under her breath. I shook my head and went about my business, figuring that was the end of it. But Karen, she wasn't done, not by a long shot. Inside the store, I saw her a few aisles over, still ranting to herself, or to whoever was unlucky enough to cross her path. I kept my distance, chuckling quietly as I picked up my groceries. By the time I checked out and headed back to my car, I'd all but forgotten about her. That changed the moment I stepped outside. Parked right in front of my car were two police cruisers, lights off but unmistakable. Two officers were standing nearby, chatting casually. For a split second, I wondered if something had happened in the lot. Then one of them turned to me. "Is this your vehicle, ma'am?" one asked, motioning toward my car. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "Is something wrong?" The officer explained they'd been called by a shopper who claimed I'd been harassing her. At first I just stared, trying to process the absurdity. Then the laughter came, and when I say laughter I mean I doubled over, tears streaming down my face. The officers exchanged confused looks, probably wondering if I was unhinged. Once I managed to catch my breath, I explained the situation, how Karen had unloaded on me for parking in a handicapped spot, only to realize I had a valid tag. By the time I finished recounting the encounter, the officers were chuckling too. One of them nodded toward the store and said, "Well, that lines up with what we saw on the security cameras and what the store associate told us. They ran my information, verified my tag, and cleared me to go. But just as I was about to get in my car, I noticed one of the cruisers wasn't moving. The officer in the driver's seat had parked it directly in front of me, blocking me in. Am I free to leave?" I asked. "You are," the other officer said with a smile. "But if you don't mind sticking around, this might get interesting." Curiosity got the better of me, so I leaned against my car, watching the scene unfold. A tow truck had pulled up and was already backing into position near Karen's car, which was still parked illegally in the hatch-marked area. The officers were inspecting her vehicle, jotting things down on their notepads. And then, like clockwork, Karen emerged from the store, a bag of groceries in one hand and her phone in the other. The moment she saw the tow truck, her jaw dropped. She marched over, waving her arms wildly. "What the hell is going on? That's my car," she screeched. One of the officers stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, your vehicle is being impounded due to several violations. Your license is suspended, your plates are expired, and the handicap tag displayed is invalid." Karen's face went through a spectrum of colors, from red to white and back to red. "You've got to be kidding me. This is harassment. You can't do this to me." "Actually, ma'am, we can," the officer replied calmly, handing her a stack of citations. "You're also being cited for improper use of a handicap tag. It's a serious offense." Karen's outrage hit a new level. She stomped her foot, yelled, and even tried to block the tow truck driver from hooking up her car. The driver, a burly guy who looked like he'd seen it all, just shook his head and kept working. "You're ruining my life," she shouted at the officers. "Do you know who I am?" "No, ma'am," the second officer replied, deadpan. "And it wouldn't matter if we did." By this point, a small crowd had gathered. Shoppers were stopping to watch the spectacle, some openly laughing. Karen, however, seemed oblivious to the audience. She kept ranting, her voice growing hoarse but losing none of its venom. Finally, the tow truck driver finished his job and climbed into the cab. Karen stood there, defeated but still fuming, as the truck pulled away with her car in tow. The officers didn't stick around much longer either. They gave her one last warning to leave the premises before she found herself in even more trouble. As for me, I climbed into my car, started the engine, and pulled out of the lot with a grin so big it hurt. Some days, karma has perfect timing.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.